A Waukesha-based company says there has been a 500% increase this past year in the demand for products they manufacture.
The Red Sox have signed a robot.
I'll tell you, they've actually signed 3 robots.
Baptist Health in Paducah uses a UVC light system to go the extra mile to kill viruses and keep you safe.
Surfacide was founded in 2010 with one goal in mind: to put the patient first. At that time, we saw an opportunity to help hospitals provide cleaner environments. At the end of the day, these patients are someone's friends or family members, and we knew that there was a critical need to provide better environments. Today, more than a decade later, we still stand by that. Surfacide is proud to be the leader in UVC technology, with thousands of our robots being used throughout the world. We now live in a world where cultivating a culture of renewed cleanliness, incorporating efficacy and optics have become the norm, whether in healthcare or across many industries, including hospitality, education, office environments, gyms, public spaces, and more. We have established Surfacide as a trusted, scientifically proven leader in disinfection solutions. And we're proud to be an American-based company, with all of our manufacturing being done at our Wisconsin headquarters. There's an innovative spirit that is woven through the DNA of the company, uniting all of our employees. The world has changed over the last decade, but our focus and mission at Surfacide has not. We continue to develop and deliver innovations for the healthcare industry and beyond. We strive to remain the unmatched leader in providing trusted solutions that empower people to improve their environments.
Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. We sincerely appreciate everybody's time and interest to learn more about Surfacide's new program of SurfRx. And so thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. For those that are on the call right now, it will be recorded. So this is something that for us that are participating today, it's obviously available, but then we'll put it out there for those that just weren't able to make it. And then finally, there will be time for questions at the end of the webinar. So if you do have a question, please simply post it into the chat and we'll do our best to get to it at the end of the conversation today. So I'm really excited by today's topic to review the upcoming changes this November to the USP 797 and the USP 800 standards. This is a topic that we're learning over the last 30 days that is front and center. And the discussion today is going to revolve specifically on the changes to the environmental controls and the Surfacide's novel solution that will assist you in meeting these new requirements. For those of you that don't have familiarity with Surfacide, Surfacide is an infection prevention solutions company founded back in 2010. And then we've had the privilege of partnering with hundreds and hundreds of hospitals and healthcare providers in the United States and throughout the world in their efforts to provide cleaner environments to their patients through the use of our patented UVC disinfection platform. Our mission is providing evidence-based solutions, and through conversation with our healthcare partners, we had identified some challenges that existed in the sterile pharmacy compounding space. And as a result, many of our partners shared that there would be benefit from the development of a simple solution that would help them meet the new USP 797 and 800 standards. We all recognize that sterile compounding is arguably one of the riskiest things that we do in our healthcare systems pharmacies. And it's fairly well understood that there has been the potential for harm over the years due to the lack of standards or the poor adoption of existing standards. And so what I really appreciate about your attendance of today's webinar is it's a clear indicator of your commitment to meet or exceed standards of care. And I think that's one thing we can all agree on, that meeting standard of care is something that we owe to all of our patients. I imagine that many of you have the same thoughts that I have in regarding change and the unease that comes with it. And I'm with you. Any change that results can make us really nervous. But I'm confident that in the next 30 minutes or so, you'll have a better clarity as to what those changes are and why they are being implemented. So today, I'm very honored to participate on this webinar with Dr. Steve Milstead and Dr. Farrell Melnick, who are both renowned experts in the sterile compounding pharmacy space. Dr. Milstead has more than 20 years of experience developing sterile compounding programs, and is the founder of a solutions consulting practice for USP 797 and 800. He is also the operational supervisor over compounding of sterile and non-sterile drugs and the coordinator over hazardous drugs at Grandview Medical Center in the Birmingham, Alabama area, while also serving on a 2-year appointment to the Pharmacy Stars sterile compounding expert panel that assists both pharmacy schools with sterile compounding and continuing education. Dr. Melnick is a senior scientific advisor to Surfacide and is a recognized leader in design and construction and inspection of the USP 797 and 800 compliant hospital and infusion center compounding pharmacies, and with involvement in more than 30 facilities in the United States. So I'm really excited by today's topic. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Milstead, and he can kind of take us off. So Steve, go ahead and go from here.
Thank you, Gunnar. So as Gunnar said, I'm going to talk today about environmental control and what that means going forward in 2023, come November 1, when these new regulations actually come to fruition and are applicable. So first, I want to talk about what is our goal for an environmental sampling plan. And there's this one sentence here that USP has put out that really says a whole lot. And that is, our goal is to determine if contamination is present at unacceptable levels and to assess if our processes are being followed. So this one statement tells us a whole lot of information. It tells us that, one, we are going to expect growth when we do a sampling plan, and from time to time, we're even going to have excursions. But instead, it's about what are we going to do to handle the excursions, and how are we going to keep that environmental control? And all the sample we get back from our sampling plan, we're going to look at that, assess it, and that's going to tell us a lot about our processes we have in place, and often see if we need to have more robust processes, or even if we need to go beyond the minimum standards of USP and apply best practices. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, if you are getting samples back and there's zero growth on every single sample we have, we really need to evaluate location and time of sampling. This is extremely important. The key areas we're going to look at are going to be the highest risk of contamination for our CSPs, and also areas that represent the conditions throughout our entire compounding environment. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of information in this chart, and I won't have time to go over it in its entirety, but it's here for your review later when it's posted. But we're going to focus again on these changes we're seeing coming up in 2023 in November. So first, air and surface samples, we're going to have a map. We're going to be required to have this map. This is going to be a physical map where an investigator can come and look at it and cross-reference it to your workflow to ensure that you're actually sampling in the correct areas. For frequency, air sampling, this doesn't change. It's still every 6 months for what is now going to be called Category 1 and Category 2 compounding, which is going to be most of your hospital pharmacies. Category 1 is going to be your segregated compounding area, and Category 2 is going to be your full compounding suite. Now for surface sampling, however, we're going to see a huge increase. This is now going to be increased monthly for most of your hospitals out there. And for location and time of sampling, again, this is extremely important. If we miss this, we kind of miss the whole thing. For air sampling, of course, we're going to look at all our ISO classified areas, but we're going to focus on the high traffic areas, and we're going to sample these under dynamic conditions when most people are present. For surface sampling, we're going to sample these areas that are listed here, but also focus on these frequently touched areas, not only frequently touched by your hands, but also places where you're sitting down objects or picking up objects from. We're going to sample these at the end of a compounding activity or end of a compounding shift and prior to cleaning and disinfecting. We want to capture our worst case scenario. Next slide, please. When it comes to incubation, we actually have 3 different ways we can incubate now. It doesn't matter which way you choose to do this incubation, but each one of them is going to entail incubating at 2 separate temperatures, 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, a higher temperature, and 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, a lower temperature, in order to capture microbes that favor those type of temperatures. Also, we're going to see that we're going to incubate just a little bit longer in order to capture slower growing organisms that may have been missed in the past. One thing that's really important to remember here is 20 to 25 degrees Celsius is pretty much room temperature, but we are going to be required to have an incubator for that temperature frame. Next slide, please. When it comes to evaluation, our action levels, they don't change a whole lot except for ISO 8 surfaces. That's been reduced now to 50 CFUs, 50 growths. If you exceed this 50, then you do have to take action. But where we really see a huge change here is identification. We no longer are required to identify to the genus level every single CFU or every single growth we have. Now we only need to identify to the genus level if we exceed the levels in this chart in the upper left-hand corner. And also the highly objectionable organisms down the lower left-hand corner, those no longer exist in the chapter. They've been removed totally. So now all our identification will lead our investigation. Next slide, please. And in closing, I'll just leave you with this chart. It is basically what we just talked about of the major changes, not all of them, the major changes from 2008 to 2023 when it pertains to environmental sampling. And to also remember that often we need to move above and beyond the minimum practices of USP and employ best practices. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to Farrell.
Thank you, Steve. As Gunnar mentioned, I'm the team leader for SurfRx program. Very excited to be that team leader. And as he mentioned, I've surveyed approximately 30 facilities and for design, construction, and USP compliance. Many of you are probably familiar already with the use of UVC as a disinfection modality, either through use in a laminar flow hood biological safety cabinet, there it is, or through references in the literature. Our Helios system for surface disinfection is authorized on label by the FDA for a 6-log reduction of many, many microorganisms, vegetative bacteria, lipid viruses, numerous fungi, most of the organisms that are present that are found in samples taken from pharmacies. 6-log reduction at a radius of 7 feet. For anything not on label yet, such as bacillus, that is being shortly submitted to the FDA for review to get it on label, so that we're confident we can basically handle any type of microorganism that might show up on a sample from the pharmacy. We all know, I believe, about the New England Compounding Center debacle of several years ago with the resultant contamination of epidural steroids that were shipped around the country with about 7 deaths and somewhere around 200, 250 people at least that became sick. I think it all just shows us that it's increasingly apparent that we have increased responsibility for maintaining sterility of our products. And our goal is really to provide you with the best available disinfection adjunct for your pharmacies. As Steve just said in his presentation, we are going, this is really best practices. USP 797 sets the bar really for the minimal standards of what you must do. We're kind of the icing on the cake, I guess, and very confident that this can serve as a great adjunct to your program of sterile compounding. It applies, by the way, to hospitals, home infusion centers, outpatient facilities, nursing homes, etc. And I'm very excited to be with you this afternoon and present you now with this preview video of our SurfRx program. So if you can roll the video, please. Thank you. So just to continue, we all know, I think, the roots of contamination that can occur in pharmacies. And this can be as a result of poor technique, poor garbing, poor gowning, skin flakes, air, water, EVS coming in, and with the increased role of pharmacists in many facilities on patient floors, there can be the inadvertent introduction of microbes into the pharmacy. I was just thinking, actually, off script for a minute while that video was playing. I've interfaced with pharmacy directors across the country, and this is really the chance to shine, so to speak. This is the chance to really take the pharmacy sterile compounding to the next level. Our program is very cost effective, and I think it's a really great way for pharmacy directors to say, hey, we really integrated this into our solution for sterile compounding, and I just think it's a real feather in everybody's cap. This is applicable to places that have both ISO 8 anterooms, ISO 7 buffer rooms, as well as places that can't achieve ISO certification and that are running through segregated compounding areas. We've had a number of discussions lately concerning sampling and contamination, and my best estimate now, people would ask me about how many pharmacies are showing contamination on any given sampling round. I'm going to estimate it's about 80 to 85%. And with that monthly sampling coming up in November, my best guess at this point is at least 90%. If you do it correctly, as I think Dr. Milstead will bear out, it's almost impossible to not have some contamination at some point. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The point is here to find out how your processes, how your employees, how the hospital programs are impacting your facility, and whether or not it's causing any contamination, and then just to eliminate it, plain and simple. I think we're at the point where, nobody's hiding behind numbers anymore. Not that anybody ever did necessarily, but we're at the point of really saying, okay, we can eliminate that. We can identify and eliminate the microbes that we need to. And with that one, I'll turn it back over to Gunnar, please.
Yeah, so, thanks, Farrell. And I think just to pick up on a couple of things that you had said, for everybody that's joining us today, you certainly are not alone by, addressing or needing to address some of the challenges that present in these sterile compounding, areas. We've had an opportunity to attend a couple of recent, conferences, the USHP in Baltimore, and then we were just getting back from APEC. And this is really front and center. So, it's great to see that institutions are acknowledging that these standards are changing, but now we're taking steps, and where I think the Surfacide SurfRx program will really come into the mix is, not only allowing you to, meet the standard of care, but then even exceeding standard of care. So again, we appreciate everybody's time today. So essentially what SurfRx is that it's an integrated UVC disinfection for, sterile compounding rooms. By delivering UVC disinfection to all surfaces that are within the direct line of sight at specific surfaces, we're capturing all surfaces. So you can see here through this diagram. But then in addition to that, we're also collecting air on a 24/7 basis. So dirty air is being collected or driven through the UVC chamber that's housed in the ceiling. And then it is being distributed over a UVC lamp or chamber and then discharged clean. So, this is just one of the areas in which that we're able to ensure that you're getting across the goal line to, meet the USP 797 standard. And you could advance the slide there, Sarah. And so what the program consists of is that it consists of the UVC Helios robot. That's the UVC device or the emitter. Surfacide has been implemented now in well over 500 or 600 hospitals, not only throughout the United States, but throughout the world. And so when you look at this tower, many of you that have familiarity with the use of UVC, oftentimes these devices are referred to as robots. So hence the reason we're using that nomenclature. But then in addition to the robot, as I just mentioned, we're placing UV Angel air disinfection systems into the ceiling. So that's essentially just replacing the current light kit that you have in that ceiling. But instead of just having a static light kit, now we've got an active modality to draw the dirty air up through the UVC chamber, discharging clean air. And that's operating 24/7. So to Farrell's earlier comments, with all the activity in the room and all the opportunity for contamination on a 24/7 basis. We're collecting that air. I think probably the other really attractive feature of our program, or some of the feedback that we've received from the early adopters, is that we realize that things in healthcare right now are pretty tough. And now you add the USP 797, and if you're going to invest the amount of capital that's required to bring yourself up to ISO standards, it's a heavy lift. You're talking about millions of dollars. Well, Surfacide isn't anywhere near that expensive. So we can either bring in our technology using capital dollars, or perhaps more importantly, we've got a subscription-based process. So individuals can bring in the technology for a low monthly fee that will include not only the UVC technology, the air technology, but now we've got consultation with a custom evaluation that are sending all the data up into the cloud, so that when the surveyors come, we're with you side by side to ensure that you can demonstrate to surveyors that this is the program that you have in place. And if it's not the surveyor, if you're meeting with the infection preventionist, or if you're meeting with the infectious disease committee, all of these data are there at your fingertips. So it's not so overly burdensome as far as how you're going to collect all these data. We've really designed it in such a way that it is the proverbial easy button. You can advance, Sarah. And so, you know, in summary, we are all playing a role in patient care. And sterile compounding, as I mentioned, you know, in my early comments, it's just such a critical initiative to, you know, standard of care and overall safety for patients. And we know that sterile compounding has evolved into, you know, a real specialty. And so again, as change evolves and everybody, you know, becomes more and more nervous, you know, as November is approaching, you know that this is a program that is getting the attention of other key opinion leaders within the space, and they've recognized or identified, you know, that this is going to fulfill a gap, you know, to make sure that we're trying to make your lives as easy as possible. And so, as pharmacists have this increasing role in patient care, we're empowering you to ensure that you are not only able to meet but exceed, you know, these standards of care in the environments that that you're, you know, coming in contact with on a daily basis. And so before we go to any questions, and I'll take a look here at the questions, you know, again, we truly appreciate everybody's time and interest today to join us. As I had shared with you, this is a relatively new program. Now, Surfacide's been around for more than 10 years, so we have a tremendous amount of experience in partnering with healthcare providers to provide better and cleaner environments. But for those of you that are trying or looking for solutions within the sterile compounding space, you know, please let us know that you've attended this webinar, and then we will work with you as far as trying to make this program as attractive as possible and make the economics work for you. So, you know, those early subscribers, we're limiting it to this first 5 subscribers. So by all means, just email to the address that you have right there, and somebody will reach out to you, you know, to walk you through what the program can look like. So there's a lot of introductory, bear with me here, folks, as I'm going to look.
Better if you can take a look at the Q&A box, not the chat box.
Oh, okay.
Directly to the right of the chat box.
Oh, there you go. There you go. All right.
Thank you.
So it looks like Nancy had a question. The airflow impact on required low air return. So I'm going to try to interpret what you're meaning there, Nancy, and if I am off base, by all means, go ahead and jump in. But it's an interesting question, and it's one that's been presented to us. We're hearing that more and more sterile compounding areas have relatively poor airflow. What we have emphasized in the conversations that we've had with those institutions that have that as a concern is that the use of our air disinfection modality is additive to what it is that you currently have. So we're certainly not replacing anything. However, if you're dealing with a situation that is of concern to you, by bringing in the air disinfection system, which is active versus being passive, all of that air is being pulled through the air disinfection chamber and then being discharged clean. So if that is answering your question, great. If you have anything else, by all means, go ahead and you know, continue to ask something in the chat. It looks like Randy had a question. Have you seen the UV Angel air disinfection system change air dynamics? You know, maybe Farrell, I'll turn that over to you as an industry expert. Again, in full transparency, this is a relatively new program. I don't know that we've seen anything, but whether Steve or Farrell, do you anticipate that that would be, you know, something that we would need to address? My initial thought is that no, we wouldn't, but I'm curious as the subject matter experts, what your thoughts are.
My initial answer is I'd get somebody from engineering to weigh in on it, really. But I mean, we're not increasing greatly any airflow. I mean, we're basically taking the room air that's already there and just pulling it through. So it's not like we're not increasing the CFM that goes into the room, you know, cubic feet per minute. We shouldn't be changing the air velocity. So it's basically taking that air, putting it through the filtration system, putting it in through more or less of a cyclone where it can interact with, or like a vortex where it can interact with the UV, and then discharging it. So my feeling at this point, I guess that's a pretty new system for us, is that we're not going to change the dynamics. I can get some engineering feedback, and I'll be happy to get back to both Randy and Nancy offline on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, and just given our experience in the operating room environment, as well as, you know, more sophisticated areas on the clinics, whether it be, you know, ICUs or where the neutropenics are being housed, you know, we haven't seen any types of disruption. But Randy asks also another pretty interesting question, and I know that I didn't touch upon it. I think one of the beautiful things in using this technology or using this overall program, Randy, is just how easy it is, but also how quickly it is that we are able to achieve effective disinfection. And so when we're bringing in this technology, the current protocol is generally dictated towards using this at end of day. And so by rolling in the Helios UVC robot, it's about a 15-minute. So only 15 minutes is required to achieve disinfection. Now, again, because this is a relatively new program, we've also had some conversations with other key opinion leaders, and they've seen the advantage, knowing that it is only taking 15 minutes, that they're considering using this in the middle of the day. And so let's just say sometime around the lunch hour or in the early afternoon where there may be a break. And we appreciate that some of these sterile compounding areas are essentially operating 24/7. But given that it's only a 15-minute disinfection cycle for surfaces, and we're operating 24/7 for air, we think that that is very conducive to the challenges that you have for just the overall throughput that you see or that is demanded within sterile compounding. And it looks like Andrew has somewhat of a similar question about UVC damage to medication. So I'll leave one other kind of an interesting element when you're using UVC as a disinfection modality. So UVC does not have the capability of penetrating glass. And so it's in my limited involvement, and then maybe Steve, you could certainly jump in here as an industry expert, but rarely do we see the medications that are just left out on the counters, or what we would say is that just put those in the glass cabinet. But if they're behind glass doors, or if they're behind something that the UVC is not able to penetrate, we would not disrupt or impact, you know, those medications. So again, our target is for all of those surfaces or all of those fomites that are in that sterile compounding area to address that. And I think that there was a partial follow-up was just the PVC and the wall cladding and some of these, and then the certification of the UVC lights. You know, so again, in the hundreds and hundreds of institutions in which we have a presence, we haven't seen that type of impact. And then as far as the certification also is being based upon, we're not suggesting that we're relaxing any of the cleaning protocols or any of the terminal cleaning protocols. But the certification will also be the proof where the rubber hits the road. It's just when we're continuing to do the monthly culturing. But I'll stop there, Steve. You know, knowing your expertise and knowing your familiarity with some of the things or the items that you may see that are still in that sterile compounding space, would you foresee any problems, with medications? Those medications, I wouldn't think would really be on those surfaces, but I'll leave it to you as an expert.
Yeah, so one thing you have to remember, like you said, if UVC cannot penetrate the glass, that's one big thing right there. And what do we have mostly in the IV room? IV products that are in glass vials. So they're protected there as well. But as for just trying to analyze whether or not you need to do anything for that, you could always cover them if you wanted to. But like you said, if it doesn't penetrate glass, then most everything we have is going to be in glass anyway. And for an environment when we're compounding, we should have minimal staging in there anyway. You shouldn't have stock in your buffer room or in your ante room that much, just minimal.
And I would agree with that assessment as well. I think that answers the question, but if it doesn't, by all means, go ahead and chime back in the chat. And so Kevin also asked kind of an interesting question, and he's just asking about the overall heat load into the clean room. And you're right, we appreciate, that these clean rooms are complex environments. I guess one of the really nice things about, the use of UVC is that, we're not generating a significant heat load. And that's evidenced by the fact that when we're in operating rooms, which are arguably larger, but if we're in small ICUs, we don't see that as well. So there is some limited heat that's generated specifically at the UVC lamp. That's where the 254 nanometer energy is being, that's where it's being released or generated. In the room itself, it would be negligible. Again, Farrell, I don't know if you have anything to add to that as an industry expert, but I can speak from our experience in other small areas where we just don't tend to see that elevation in room temperature.
Yeah, Kevin, I'd like to actually talk to you offline a little bit about your HVAC system, because I'm wondering if you have enough CFM going in the room. Most of the clean room really should not be that hot. In my experience, it hasn't been. And I've surveyed a lot of clean rooms. So I'd be curious, be happy to give you any feedback that I could regarding the HVAC system you have in place there. And which, as you mentioned, the primary engineering controls, but it really shouldn't be heating up the clean room that much. So I'm happy to, work with you, speak to you offline about that one too.
Yeah, so absolutely, Kevin. By all means, just go ahead and reach out to it's probably the easiest, the email address that you see down below, in this on this particular screen, just SurfRx, and we'll certainly round back with you, and we could have that sidebar consultation. Well, we are approaching.
Yeah, the same with Nancy and Randy.
I'll give it 2 more minutes. Pardon me.
I'm saying I'd like to work offline with Nancy and Randy also, and we'll get some engineering feedback for them about airflow impact from.
Yeah, that's a great point. And now that we're approaching time, we can give it a couple of more minutes to see if there's any individuals that are the shy ones in the audience, and you can enter into the chat. But by all means, if you do have questions that have not been answered during this webinar, just please reach out to the surfrx@surfacide.com, and we will certainly get back to you, likely before end of week, to make sure that we're providing you the information that you need. All right, I'm not seeing anything else coming in through the question in the chat. So again, I would just like to sincerely thank everybody for your time and interest this afternoon to spend a little bit of your time to learn more about this solution. It is something that is definitely garnering the attention of those that are in the industry, and that is supported by the fact of the 2 recent conferences that we've attended. For those that have watched this, and if you review it as the recording, and if there's a question that you dawn on, or if you'd certainly like just to receive some additional simple information, I strongly encourage you to reach out again to that surfrx@surfacide.com email address, and somebody will reach out to you. So thank you again, everybody. I hope everybody has a fantastic 4th of July holiday weekend. I'm sure that we will be in touch with many of you probably shortly right after the holiday to see if there's any additional information that we can provide. But thank you again, everybody, for your time and interest, and have a great 4th of July.